Hey there, I'm Cerise Fairfax, and this is Storytime. If you like stories that are true and also quite shocking sometimes and disturbing at other times, then I think you might like this story. And if you do like Storytime, period, please check out my playlist and subscribe to my channel for stories based upon truth and lies and deceit, but also love as well. Alrighty, guys. I gotta tell you, this story here is based around decisions that people make that aren't always the best for them, and they have to rethink them until they actually realize that what they made could have been a mistake. Okay, so we're gonna name the three characters. We're gonna name one Dan, we're gonna name one Denny, and we're going to name the female Dolores. So Dan and Denny and Dolores. Now Dolores, she is a woman that lives in the Dominican Republic. She's not originally from the Dominican Republic, but her parents brought her here many years ago when she was a young child. She was born in the United States and her dad is Dominican, her mom is American. They came here when she was just a young child. So she was living here for a while and she really enjoyed just being here, enjoying the people, enjoying the landscape, everything that the Dominican Republic has to offer. And if you've been here, then you know it is definitely a special place. Well, she met a lot of people. She's beautiful. And met a lot of people, and she has traveled the world with many different men that she has met. She has had the opportunity to move to Germany and live there for the rest of her days, but she decided not to because she lives a very good life right here in the Dominican Republic. Her parents are not wealthy, but they did take very good care of her. Her dad is a little bit older than her mother, so he had worked a lot in America and saved a lot of money, and when his mother died he came back here to be on the lay of the land and just rebuild his life here. And the mom, well, her dad died, Dolores's mother. Her dad died and left her a nice significant amount of money. Now again, it didn't make them wealthy beyond belief, but enough for them to come here and invest together and build on their land. And they did that. And they continue to do that today. They're builders, but this video is not about Dolores's parents. That was just a little background history to give you an example of how she doesn't need the money from the men. So the men that do come here recently have been guys that, they're like, wow, she's amazing. She works in a bank and she also works in finances outside of the bank. She helps people get accountants and helps them do investments. So the guys come here and they think to themselves, she doesn't really need them for anything. And some of those guys that do come here, they are looking for love. They are looking for a woman that's long-term relationship material, marriage material. But most times, and especially here in Sosua, they will find young girls that may not be mentally ready for a relationship. And although they talk a good talk and they walk a good walk, the proof is always in the pudding. And when they are about to dish the pudding, that's when the men quickly realize, after a short while, sometimes after a long while, that the woman is just not as mature as they thought she would be, and they end up having to move on to another woman. Well, when it came to Dolores, a lot of the men were like, "Oh wow, like she has a lot to give," but she also had her own terms, and those terms were accept her for who she is. She didn't want anything from the men, even though she knew that they were willing to give the shirt off their backs. A lot of the men that she met from America were coming here and they were desperate. They were desperate for love. They looked at here, a place, the Dominican Republic, as a place to come find a beautiful woman with culture and still some traditional values. And yes, she did have that. She had a lot of traditional values because coming back here as a young child, she was brought up very Dominican, so she loves to cook. And she doesn't mind cleaning because she loves a beautiful, clean place. She takes a lot of pride in her home. So she met one guy. His name was Dan. Dan was a very nice guy. He was here, almost retired. He was more like a nomadic, living a nomadic lifestyle, but he worked online. And so he was like falling in love with Dolores. And him and Dolores, they started a relationship. Now, Dolores, as beautiful as she is, she met another guy named Denny. And Denny walked into her bank and he sat down and he really enjoyed the way she spoke. Her English was very good and he couldn't even believe that she was Dominican raised. He's like, "Wow, like where are you from? Your English is so good." And she's like, "Well, I was born in the States, but my dad is Dominican and I live in, the Dominican Republic ever since I was young." And he's like, "You are a very different type of woman." He's like, "Are you married?" She's like, "No," because she wasn't married to Dan and she isn't married to Dan. And he said, "Are you in a relationship?" She said, "Well, at times, yes." And he said, "What do you mean at times?" And she said, "Well, my boyfriend understands that I'm young and that I like to have my freedom. So every now and again, I stay with him. And then other times I go and I stay with my family." And he said, "Okay, but are you like committed to this man?" She said, "Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not." He said, "Okay, why don't we talk more about this over dinner?" Because at this point they were still in the bank and he didn't really feel that she was opening up enough. She was being evasive. So he said, "Can I take you out for dinner?" And she said, "Sure." So she said, "Here's my number." She wrote down her number for him and they met up for dinner that night. When they went out for dinner, she was still saying the same thing she did in the bank. And he said, "I don't understand why you're not being more open now. You were being so evasive in the bank. I thought it was maybe because you were at work." He said, "But you're still being just as evasive. Like, what do you have with this man?" She said, "Listen, this man is a very nice man. He's older than me, but I know I will never be able to have children with him. I know that if I wanted him to, he could take care of me for the rest of my life, but that's not what I want. I like to be treated good. I like to go out to dinner. I like to be treated like a queen, and this man does that. But the deep love is not there." And so Denny said, "Well, do you think you could maybe one day get over that and move on and be with someone else?" And she told him straight up, she said, "I really love this guy named Dan, but I'm not in love with him. But I love him and I respect him and I could never see myself leaving him because he is a great man." And Denny said, "Well, I don't understand that then. Why don't you just let him go so he can find someone to love him and treat him good and be more respectful to his heart?" And she said, "Oh, I'm respectful to him and I do love him, but he's an older man now and even he understands that that passion is not there. But we're great companions. And when he wants someone over to cook for him and clean for him and he wants someone to spend time with him, I go over. I share time with him. And then when I'm a little bit bored or I need to focus on my other projects going on in my life, I go home to my parents." And he said, "Well, that sounds like a relationship." And she said, "It is. I am in a relationship with him. But sometimes it's just tighter than others." And he said, "Well, what could I do to convince you to be with me?" And she said, "Nothing. You don't need to convince me. We need to get to know each other. And once we get to know each other, if I see that your heart is good and you're a wonderful man, then we can be together when we're together." And he said, "Okay, well, all right." So he got together with her thinking that, eventually she would leave Dan. Eventually she would fall in love with him. And she did. She started to have very deep feelings for Denny. They were having fun. They were going out. They were dating. And, Dan, eventually one day, Dan found out about it. Dan was at a bar and Denny was at a bar And he overheard someone speaking to Dan, and the person said, well, Dan, your girlfriend, she's probably dating other men. And Dan said, well, Dolores is Dolores, right? Like, what can I do about that? She's a lovely lady, and at least she doesn't try to take from me everything, and at least she doesn't try to use me for anything. And we get along good when she's at my place. I don't mind treating her to the finest things in life that she enjoys. She can get them on her own or from her family, so it's not like she's only coming to see me for that. Now, of course, Denny overheard, and Denny went over to Dan and said, you're Dan. You are Dolores's boyfriend, right? And Dan said, yes. Are you also dating Dolores? And Denny said, well, I think I am. And Dan said, okay, well, that's great. How long has this been going on for? And Denny looked at Dan and he's like, what in the world? Like, it just was so eerie that Dan could just be so nonchalant about it. And Denny said, well, I'm not quite sure. Like, I feel a little uncomfortable talking about this to you. And Dan said, listen, you came over to confront me on it. You might as well just let me know the rest of the information. You're not the first. I'm sure you won't be the last. So tell me what's up. What do you want to know? Denny said, well, I guess I want to know, like, are you in love with her? And Dan laughed and he said, of course I am. And Denny said, well, do you think she loves you? Dan said, of course she does. Denny said, well, doesn't it bother you that she sleeps with other men? And Dan said, listen, if she sleeps with other men, then it would bother me, because then I know that she's just sleeping around for something. But she doesn't sleep with just any man. She picks one that she really enjoys, and she enjoys him for a while until he can't accept the fact that I'm in the picture, and then he takes off. And Denny's like, well, I don't get it. Like, you know, I don't. And he's like, listen, some women, they can't settle down with just one man. And I am her constant. I'm always there for her. I get her. I understand her. She's an easy woman to love, an easy woman to make love to, and an easy woman to please. And at my age now, I'm not looking for anyone to marry or to have kids with. And it's just really easy for me to be with her and for her to be with me. So if you feel like you've fallen in love with her and she loves you, good. You have a good woman there on your hands. And Denny looked at Dan and said, but what does she get out of it being with you? And he said, does she need to get anything out of it? Dan looked at Denny and said, listen, I don't think she really needs to get anything out of it except a little affection and a little love. And I give her a lot of affection and a lot of love, and she enjoys it. And Denny said, well, do you think maybe one day she'll just up and leave you for someone that doesn't up and leave her? And Dan said, that could be possible one day. But the way we are and the way our friendship is, she'll always come back to me and she'll always enjoy the time that we shared. So Denny said, so you are more of her friend and not her boyfriend then? Dan said, listen, we've been together for a while. I've met the family. They met me. And we're just known to be good friends, if you want to put it that way. But we do things that lovers do. And if you want to call that a friend, you can call it whatever you like. I call it a relationship. Is it a marriage? No. Is it a relationship that's going to last forever? Probably not. I will kick the can before I know it, and that'll be it. And Denny said, well, are you leaving everything to her? Dan said, no, nothing at all. I have kids, and I'm not married to her, and we're not common law, and my kids know about her, and I live part-time here and part-time in America. Denny said, well, how often do you go to America? And he said, oh, at Christmas time to see my grandchildren, and I'm there for about a week, and then I come back home. Denny said, so then you don't really live in America? Dan said, well, enough. I have enough connection with my family for them to know that if anything happens to me, then everything goes to my family, not to Dolores, but I'm sure that they may give Dolores my house. It's really nothing, worth nothing, and it's built on her family's land that I bought from them. So what's the big deal? And he said, listen, Denny, if you're interested in Dolores, pursue her. But don't ever expect to hold her down. She's just one of those women that love to have a lot of different men. And the men that she has, it's always a meaningful relationship. It's not something that is just meaningless to her. Denny tried to wrap his brain around it and he just couldn't. So finally he sat down with Dolores and he said, listen, I met Dan. And Dolores said, yes, I know. Dan told me. And he's like, well, he seems like a nice guy. Why don't you want him? And she said, I do. And he said, well, why don't you just want him and nobody else? And she said, because that's just not my personality. I love spending time with him, but I like to keep myself open to other men that I may want to enjoy time with. And he said, well, what about us? Like, what are we? And she said, you and I are like Dan and myself. We are close friends and lovers. And he said, well, I don't know how to put that because I want to be with you. Like, I want to live with you. I want to have time with you in the future. And if I ever do plan to have children, I want them to be with you. Now, Denny obviously was a lot younger than Dan. And Dolores said to him, well, one day I would like to have children, but not right now. And if you and I can build a life worth living together, then yes, maybe we can have children. But I'm not making any promises, and right now as it stands, I'm not changing my life for you. So fast forward 2 years. All of a sudden, Dan gets sick, and he refuses to go back to America. He does not want to die in America. He wanted to die here in the Dominican Republic, his home. So now, Dolores, she's really worried about him, and she moves in with him permanently. Now, Denny, he's like, listen, I don't get to see you any longer. I don't get to have you around me any longer. I don't know what to do. And she said, well, move in with Dan and me. Denny's like, well, no, I have my own villa, and I'm comfortable in my own house. So she said to him, well, that's it. I'm not going to spend any time at your place when Dan is sick. Dan was sick for a good 3 months. He didn't die. He actually bounced right back, healthier than ever. Dolores fed him good health food. She made him smoothies every morning. She cooked for him. She wouldn't allow him to eat any foods that were no good for him, and she took very good care of him. After 3 months, she actually got used to living with Dan and enjoyed it quite well. Denny decided to rent out his villa and move in with Dan and Dolores. Now, at the time, he thought it was a really good decision. He thought it was going to be wonderful. And every night, Dolores would go into her bedroom. She had her own bedroom, and she would sleep in her own bedroom. And that would be it. She didn't sleep with any of the men. It wasn't like she slept with one man for a week or a night and then the other one. None of that. If she wanted to have any type of intimacy with any of them, it didn't go on in the house. If her and Denny wanted to go out somewhere, they would go out for the day. They would go to like a day type of spa, like an excursion type of spa, and they would rent a hotel for the day. They would have their wonderful time together, and then they would go back to the house. They never held hands in the house, didn't cuddle, anything like that. And Denny actually started to become used to that type of lifestyle. And on top of it, Dan, he was not active any longer. After the 3 months of being sick, he had ED. He was healthy again, 100%, but he had ED. So for him, it wasn't about the intercourse with Dolores. It was the intimacy. It was the closeness. It was being taken care of with love and respect. And so he knew that the two of them were always, when they would go out, they would be intimate. And he respected the fact that Dolores never ever did anything in the house. And he also respected Denny for understanding the situation. And he knew at any moment that Denny could leave Dolores. And he felt like if Denny did leave Dolores, Dolores would miss Denny and also feel regretful that she stayed with Dan instead of leaving Dan and going with Denny. So Dan was thankful to the both of them. Then, eventually, Dan did pass on. When Dan passed on, Denny was left with Dolores, and he was so happy. But the dynamics changed. Dolores went back to her parents, and the house, even though it was left to her, the Dan's children gave the house to Dolores. Dolores rented it out as an Airbnb. And she went back to her parents, and Denny went back to his place. And he wasn't renting it out as an Airbnb any longer. He was living in it. He was expecting Dolores to move in with him because they lived together so long at Dan's house. And Dolores said to him, I love you, but there's no need for us to live together any longer. I will come to your place and I will stay with you. And she did. She went to his place and she would stay for a couple of weeks, and then she'd go back to her parents' house for a couple of weeks, and so on and so forth. Denny could not make sense of it. And then she found another lover. Dolores, the same way she met Denny, was the same way she met this new guy in the bank. Well, Denny was angry and upset because he felt that she would at least stay with him now that Dan passed on. And that didn't happen. And he tried to rack his brains with why she didn't want him and him only. And the only thing that would keep going through his brain is what Dan said to him. That's just the type of woman she is. She likes more than one man at a time. So Denny decided that she was going to be a woman of the past for him. Denny decided that he just couldn't do it any longer. He was ready for children. He was ready for something better. He was ready for someone to love him and him only. So he left Dolores. And Dolores could not handle that because he left Dolores for another woman. Now, this other woman, he didn't love her the way he loved Dolores. But he felt like in time he would. He felt like in time he would care for this woman because this woman did not need two men at a time. This woman was only focused on a long-term relationship, and Denny respected that more than he loved Dolores. At that moment in his life, he really did want to have children and get married, and he felt that Dolores was just not compassionate enough to his feelings. Well, Dolores ended up losing it on Denny. When she found out that he left her for another woman, you see, for her and her brain, it was okay for her to be doing what she was doing. But for Denny to have pride within himself, to have that self-respect and to pick up and leave for another woman, it just sickened her deeply. So she ended up going to his house and knocking on his door and saying to him, please, I will give up the other man if you can just be with me, if you can just stay with me. Help me work through this. Help me be in control of my emotions, and also help me to love you and only you. And for the first time, Denny did not love her at all. He looked at her and he grabbed her by her hand. He took her by the pool and he sat her down and he said, Dolores, I gave so much of myself to you. I believed that one day when Dan passed on, you would be with me and me only. I had myself convinced that the only reason why you were sticking with Dan was because you felt bad that he was an old man and he had nobody else. But after he left, and you made the decision to leave me and go back to your parents, and then you made the decision to get another man, I realized that I was only fooling myself. And you really are what Dan said, the type of woman that always needs more than one man. I can't change that in you. I cannot help you change that about you. That is who you are. And until one day you feel hurt and you realize the pain that you put the men through, all the men that have left you, you will not understand your own character. Until you realize what you've done, you will not be able to be with one man. And she looked at him and she's like, what? Like, how could you just fall out of love with me? He said, I don't know what it is, but when you knocked on the door just now and when you said to me what you said, I realized that you, somewhere inside of you, you're different. I always thought maybe you were a little damaged. I always thought maybe you were a little hurt. But I realized it's that you were never hurt. So now I can't be with you and I can't deal with that. And she said, well, you are hurting me right now. Like, I feel like you were gone and now I don't want anything except you. And he said, I'm sorry. There's no way that I can be in a relationship with a woman that doesn't love me the way I deserve to be loved. And that was it. And he made that choice because he realized that she is the type of woman that needs to have at least two men. At the end of the day, there was nothing that he could do to make her love him unless he left her. And that is the irony in it all, because he knows that if he was to go back to her and if she loved him all over again and only him, she wouldn't be the woman she was when he met her. So these days he's contemplating, is he the one that was messed up for accepting that type of a relationship? Or was he the one that was sent into her life to hurt her in order for her to change and stop hurting others? At the end of the day, Dolores is still with that one man, and she hasn't moved on to any other men. People see her around town all the time with the one guy, and she seems to be happy with him. She seems to be herself, but every now and again, when she has a couple of drinks, she calls Denny and cries and says she can't believe that he hurt her the way he did. I guess this teaches us all a lesson in life, that there are some people out there that just can't settle down with one person. And chances are it's because they've never been hurt the way they've hurt others. And then there are those people that will sacrifice their own dignity to be with someone else that is not dedicating themselves to them only. And then, of course, those people need to also learn a lesson to love themselves more. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, I am Cerise. This is Storytime, and look out for the next story that will be coming out about a guy that left his wife for a younger woman, and she ended up doing him wrong. Take care, everyone. Take care of yourself, and remember to subscribe if you enjoy Storytime. Huge hugs, loads of love, big blesses. Hit that like button. It's waiting for you.